I think there's quite a lot of underlying points that have been mentioned, in particular that there need to be new relationships between the local environment and people experiencing that environment. The need for decentralization, I think, of how we operate as either cultural institutions, but also as humans, and how we understand our role within what Tina just now proposed as an appeal towards moving away from destructive and going towards restorative ways of going about the world. So I would maybe first start off with a question to Maria, in fact, because you mentioned in particular the challenges about running this new 21st century art institution in a decentralized way, or as you call it, as an island formation, what was also greatly described in the video. And I'm wondering what are really the challenges that you are facing that would keep you from really establishing this much more in the long term, as opposed to employing other models which are much more one-dimensional, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I think the answer is very short to that, because we're not properly structured yet. A lot of things have moved to what we hope looks more like collaborative models in many sectors. The thing about art and artists is that their practice is unique and is done by themselves. They're signing something off, and this is intrinsically what they do. They take responsibility for the things they put into the world, if it's done well. I mean, if they're really serious about their work. So this responsibility is a difficult thing to share, and I think that's always the challenge in a culture institution. There was the model of Universitat, which was Emilio Amba's model many years ago, and it never idea because you know, people just want to govern their own piece of land in a way. So it is an ambitious model. I think this crisis situation might make it even possible, because right now we all need to look at what's essential. And if you look at what's essential, sometimes collaborating with others really helps to get not only ideas out, but to be able to accomplish certain things. A lot of people say that it's hard to collaborate as well, because a top scientist is very involved with his own work. He'll never sit around with a top artist, because that's not what they do. They'll have beers together, but it's hard to get people to collaborate when they're very specialized in their fields, because very focused on their own. If anything is very light, then the collaboration is interesting, but sometimes not very groundbreaking or fruitful. So, but the other day we had a conversation with someone who's working on AI, and he said that maybe AI will help us collaborate better between specialists. So these are all ideas we're looking at, we're thinking about, and voilà.
Jakob, your mic, you have to turn it on.
Yeah, another point was that was in a way reoccurring in Tim's as well as Dean's talk was the aspect of commodifying different types of experiences, and I'm wondering. There was also the point in the previous panel that rather a question: how can we produce experiences where nothing really has to be produced, or there is no certain pressure to have to produce certain things? And my question would be, what would be the ways of going about that? Maybe a question for Tim at the beginning.
Yeah, I would be happy to say something. Don't know if it's going to be any good though. Anything can be weaponized. So there's no way to invent like a perfect, avant-garde utopian form that's going to crack this problem. Anything can be weaponized, and the idea of completely open experience was already a sort of a invention, product, whatever, of the Romantic period. We've had this for 200 years. It hasn't worked perfectly so far, so I think we might need to try something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe also on Dean's perspective on that.
I think that it's very important in several of the presentations to focus on the possibilities that are being produced for people to have an exchange in the whatever the tourist experience is, that there be more of an emphasis based on the possibility of a connection between local people and the tourists, which a lot of the devices of the tourist industry actually work against that exchange. And so I would be in favor of underscoring the importance of the development of those kinds of possibilities. I think that the host people are interested in trying to, at least it's been my experience, and they want to be able to show and to talk about and to share what they regard as important and worthwhile in their lives. And they want to be able to get the response of the tourists to that. And that kind of exchange is what gets erased or rubbed out of the commercialization of the tourist experience. So that's where I would go in any effort to. I really enjoyed Maria's and Tina's presentation, where they emphasized the importance of the art and architecture as possibly providing a basis for that kind of exchange, and would be, very much interested in assisting in that kind of an effort.
Thank you. I would have actually a question for Maria, because you were so self-critical on creating this kind of art tourism with the thousands of biennials as the generation, which I think it was extremely important to see so data presented and with all the kind of graphs. This is now a huge change of what is happening. Did you consider of how this kind of art tourism, which became already a problem also in Venice or in Basel, or in all these kind of smaller cities, but anyway, where would that art-related tourism lead according to what happened now? Because probably at least a year or so, no massive events would be happening. Or have you thought of that? Maybe?
It's not the gathering of people that's the problem. When people gather, miracles happen despite who brings them together. It's just because when people get together, they talk, they do all kinds of things together that makes most of those kinds of experiences fruitful, despite the goal of the event. But I think it's the anticipation of the event that makes things not so fruitful. The event opening days have, 30 to 40,000 visitors, and then 2 days later it goes down to 1,000. you know, people aren't really interested in art. I mean, I've gone to many biennials where you know, I've worked for the past almost 20 years on biennials and triennials and art fairs and everything. So I always go as a professional. I have to go. I have to work. But many times I haven't even seen the biennial. You know, the thing that I'm there to do, I cannot do because of the event, because of the anticipation, because of the, you know, people crying because they can't get into a party, things that have nothing to do with the mission of art or endeavor or poetry or anything else. So I think this should stop. The problem is that there's so many jobs related to it, and they're all precarious jobs. You know,
I know you presented this very clearly. It was interesting.
€2,000 a month if they're very lucky. So this has to be changed. I mean, we have to find ways of using creative people in more creative ways. And this is not cracked yet. This will take a lot of time. I'm very skeptical about the future.
Yeah. I mean, we all are, I think, you know. For that reason, we are trying to question it in any possible way. I would also have a question for Tim, because you spoke about the alienation, which is so obvious in this certain types of tourism, or almost all types of tourism. Do you think it's any possible way for the integration on the other hand, and how so, if yes?
Well, the big picture is, what are we alienated from, you know, and most theories of alienation have to do with being alienated from some kind of authentic past state, right? The trouble with this is that there is an implicit kind of game space that's happening in one or two of the squares on that board are fascist squares. You know, if you're looking for meaning in the past, you know, I think we're alienated from the future. I think we're alienated from the possibility of things being different, right? You know, this is the trouble with automation, right? It's not the artificial intelligence. It's the fact that the past is eating the future because a software recipe, whatever algorithm, is basically, you know, the past kind of building itself out into that's not really the future. That's just more of the past, right? So with that in mind, it's not a difference between alienation and not alienation. It's more like, you know, everything you see around you is alienation because you can't see the future, right? You can't see that. That's kind of withdrawn, or kind of, it's real, but you can't see it, right? That's the whole trouble. So there's a kind of truth to the other ideology theory, actually, which is that we're totally surrounded by ideology, and everything is ideology. The trouble is that that sentence must also be ideology if the formal, you know, truth of that is to be sort of you know, accepted. So that's not really quite right. So we're alienated from the future, and the reason why we can check is actually that this future is not visible to us. Yeah. And so the object of any kind of practice at all, whether it be tourism or any kind of political artistic practice at all, would be to try to enable just the possibility that things can be different to start to become obvious, because it's never really gone, right? That's the thing. We never really were actually alienated. You know, we're living in a biosphere. It's part of us. We're part of it. It's this idea that we keep telling ourselves that we're sort of not, you know. So I wouldn't like to see it as like the alienated versus non-alienated stuff. I think that's still kind of playing in this kind of skylight area, romantic period kind of game space where, you know, we've got to find the right way of doing it. And if we find the right way of doing it, then we'll be free. Oh dear, look at all those people getting it wrong, you know, but we made the ad for them to get it wrong too, right? So it's not about that. I think it's more about a different way of inhabiting the space of consumerism. There's some kind of weird, you know, pleasure logic to it, you know. The trouble with it is not that it's too much pleasure, but it's not enough, right? Because once you know that cruise ship is doing that much, I mean, I couldn't believe these diagrams you were showing, right? Like I could not believe the amount of pollution and emissions those ships would, it was criminal, actually criminal. People who run them should be put on trial for war crimes or something, you know, and once you know that, you can't enjoy it, right? Because, you know, coral enjoying itself and polar bears enjoying itself and, you know, snails enjoying themselves is also part of enjoyment, right? And like, so the ecological era is more pleasure, not less pleasure, right? And so from there, you can sort of say, well, the possibility that things can be different via new kinds of sort of pleasure orientation that include, you know, non-human beings in the equation. And rather than this kind of authentic versus not authentic problem, which is kind of like trying to exit from up there. If you try to do that, that's like Alice in Through the Looking Glass, right? She's trying to leave the house, but every time she tries, she kind of comes back to the front door. Sort of been there, done that.
Thank you so much. Very, very insightful. Super nice comment. Do we have any questions from the audience on the YouTube, or we ask for closing remarks, Jakob?
Well, I have a question from the other room here. It partly addresses to Dean and partly to you, Tina. Dean, you were explaining the monetary, the economy around tourism, which was very graphic and insightful. And Tina, you were asking about, you know, things are bound to be changed. They've radically changed with this health crisis. And now there's an opportunity to kind of start anew or maybe make something out of this reset. But not only from now on, we have already seen things changing in the field of over-tourism already before. So if you can just kind of mention obvious Airbnb platform where it started and grew enormously from just simply providing service of accommodation for the visitor to see, you know, the site, whether this is UNESCO site or an urban situation that it's for free and you don't pay for, and they were monetizing this service. We've seen the change already happening into shifting Airbnb, not just providing services for accommodation, but practically providing experiences. So you could start to rent a cooking experience at somebody's home. And it was amazing how fast they switched with the health crisis, where nobody was moving nowhere, into translating those experiences they were providing into online experiences. So we witnessed services to start becoming destinations or experiences. So what do you make out of that, Dean?
Well, I think that the first thing to bear in mind is that tourism has become so huge that it already brackets all of the human tendencies, you know, good and evil, that are available, you know, to humanity. So that we can't just say tourism and the search for experience and we're on the right path or we're on the wrong path. Within tourism, and this is what I've tried to highlight, is that there are contradictions and paradox inside of tourism that have to be understood before we can start to see our way into the future. And inside of tourism, the most contradictory tendencies is the desire to have no experience whatsoever. That is, I think that is most manifest in the concept of the cruise to nowhere, where you have an all-inclusive cruise experience on a ship that just drives out of port and anchors and then drives back into port, versus a tourist that is actually attempting to grapple with the ways of life of other people and to figure out how that connects to their own understanding of themselves. So you've got these two almost completely opposed desires or drives that are all inside of the brackets of tourism. And the hopeful sign to me of the impact of the virus is that it strikes me that it will be the most impactful on these negative anti-creative desire to have zero experience, and the least impactful on the other side, where people are very much interested in attempting to see and experience and to benefit from, in terms of their own awareness, the lives of others. And so that's, I think that the economic effects will definitely fall on what I would consider to be the worst tendencies of tourism, unevenly fall on the worst tendencies of tourism.
If I may add, I see Airbnb actually very similar to the Amazon, because what they, you know, it at the beginning it was kind of a novel and actually quite locally oriented. You could get a book or you could actually rent a flat. But of course, they grew up in this kind of enormous economies where they are not paying the taxes, and they are actually limiting the amount of people who, you know, the students, the charges and then the rents and everything goes up. So that's the problem versus Amazon versus Airbnb, is that they grew out, and what they do both in the case of Airbnb and what you mentioned, Aljosa, is that 5 to 10 years ago, we also noted down as this, when we were searching for this participatory experiences, you could hire a local, you could have a cooking session with a local, but that was this kind of, you know, bottom-up initiative for someone, you know, not, you know, some people started as activism, those things in different cities, in different kind of contexts. And now, of course, Airbnb saw that there is a potential economic aspect to those things, and they started to provide also those for that, which is the same thing as what Amazon does when they copy. First they sell a product. Once they see that this product does well, they start to copy that product and they actually sell their own product. And this, I think it's hugely problematic, because, you know, all these grassroots initiatives are actually then industrialized within this kind of platform. And actually all the taxes, all the profits, we have the same problem as it was accentuated today in John's Takara's presentation, that only a small proportion of that remains with the local. And therefore, of course, you should have a larger platform allowing that, but actually this is just somehow similar to the cruise ship company just evading the tax and the policies, which are the loose, low policies here. Jakob, do we have any questions?
Nothing that would be anything new. I think I would just maybe lead it now towards a final set of remarks or conclusions. Maybe one of you starts. Maybe Maria, you start.
Yeah, because night is falling in my house. And everything is getting dark now, so yeah, well, I hope we can do this in real life very soon. I think the issues are really are really deep and now revealed. What we suspected is really true. I mean, there really are dysfunctions right now, huge ones, and there, you know, the possibility of some form of logical transformation probably won't happen this time, but maybe it's like September 11th when we saw the first plane. We said, oh, poor guy, he hit the tower, you know, but when we saw the second plane, we said, now we're in deep shit. And I don't think we've seen the second plane yet with this crisis. I'm still waiting for it because, you know, anyway, that's what I'm waiting for. I hope we don't see it, but I think things will happen now that will mark us, and some will be good. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria, so much for your contribution. I think it's also very good, I think, a closing statement, because just being aware of dysfunctions and revealing them and re-questioning them from different perspectives, also this very specific one of the last weeks, I think it's important, but of course, seeing it's wider and rechecking it when the second plane hits the tower and afterwards. But yeah, we haven't discussed the future, I think, as much as we did in this symposium, because usually architects, we are just showing what we are doing and how is that slow. But actually now it's the slow and fast are kind of emerging and alienating from each other on a daily basis. So maybe, Tim, could you give us some closing remarks?
Well, the anthropologist in me is always deeply believing that that our culture is supposed to act to save us from our worst tendencies, and sometimes I lose hope in that. I look around and say, it just doesn't seem to be working, but. In the rare conversations such as these, my hope rises up a little bit, and I do look to the future. I'm not one of the people that's afraid for the future of our children, because our children, I believe, will work it out. No matter how much crap we've delivered them to have to deal with. I like to see work going on in real time, and I've been very encouraged by and honored to be asked to participate in this conversation.
Thank you, Dean, so much. It was great to meet you in California some months ago, a year and more ago. We still look forward to see you here in Europe anytime soon, if possible. Thank you for your contribution and this kind of positive remarks, I think, at the end. There is always some positive options in the future. Thank you. Tim, can I ask you please for your closing remarks?
Sure. It's been an honor to be part of this. We know what to do already. The problem is, why are we not doing it? We've got all the skills inside of us. One of the things that's inhibiting us from doing stuff is this idea, which is borrowed mostly from patriarchal religion, that we have to have some special different way of being that, you know, that we can't quite achieve, that we have to park all the bad stuff. And as we enter this new era of whatever it is, we'll have to take on a totally new, sort of modus operandi. And I think we've got the gear around us. We've got this, people, just ordinary people who go to garden centers know what solidarity with other life forms is about, actually. And so people like me should stop making people like them feel stupid and evil.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jakob, do you want to say something?
Yes. Yeah, thanks again, all of you, for joining. I think this symposium has proven to me that the discussion around tourism needs to be interdisciplinary. It's something that I think hasn't happened enough yet. And I hope that this symposium can kind of kickstart this conversation into that type of direction. I think one of the recurring topics that I take from is as Tim said, we know what to do already, but on the other hand, our role as creatives, we need to establish the correct or the fruitful infrastructures or opportunities that would facilitate that type of ways of thinking, ways of understanding, and ways of creativity and creation in the future. So I thank you all really for that multi-dimensional approach and perspectives, also from the previous panel. I think to me it's also very, I could say, satisfying, because the course that we were running the previous year with students, we were looking at how to understand the future of tourism, or the role of tourism within a planet in crisis through these aspects of nanotourism, has also opened so many directions, not just for myself, but also for the students that have been working really hard on this agglomeration of thoughts and ideas and research, which is now exhibited as part of the exhibition, which you can find on rethinking tourism for planet in crisis, rethinking tourism for planet in crisis.com. And again, I wish to treat that as a kind of kickstart for further discussions, and at some point also physical meetings and collaborations.
Thank you, Jakob. Thank you for really organizing all this. It was actually all your energy over the last year that you were so persistent, trying to bring everyone together on one date, trying to find the place, then trying to find a virtual place and virtual tools for making this happen. Also the exhibition and research of the students. I think what you all now somehow concluded so well is that also with these talks and with these events and with these teachings on different platforms like a nanotourism visiting school, or at TU Vienna, or in all the activities and workshops in Luma and further on, with all this we are making the community which is addressing these issues larger. And if we, with all the live stream and this discussion, I think we are at least, we will all know what to do, and maybe even if it's small percentage of us would do a small step, we will do something for the future. I look forward to the further rethinking of what we heard today. So I look forward to reach out back to you for making the publication. Thank you so much for everyone, wherever they are. You are in total darkness, Maria. I have some light. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks, Jakob.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you. Have fun.